It's an honor to speak with you, Mr. Robert Salas, and it is a nice visit here in Cork that we were able to find ourselves. It's October 5th, 2017, and thank you so much for granting me the interview today. And maybe we could start chronologically with your very important incident that you experienced during your military career. But before we delve into that, can you tell us something about your bio and especially what you were doing in 1960s?
Okay, I was in the Air Force. I had graduated from the Air Force Academy, so I was a career officer. I had been flying drones. I also was air traffic control for a while, doing training missions in air traffic. And then I went into the Intercontinental Ballistic Missile Launch Officer. So I was stationed at Malmstrom Air Force Base, Montana, and starting from 1966 through 69. I was there for 3 years. Then I worked at the Los Angeles Air Force Station on the Titan III program. I was a propulsion engineer for the Titan III. And then I resigned from the Air Force in 1971. Became involved in aerospace engineer for a while, and then for the Federal Aviation Administration as aircraft certification engineer. So I worked for the FAA for some 21 years, and then I became a school teacher. I taught mathematics for about 17 years. Okay.
That's really nice and rich career. And I think you had something like 35 years of service for the government.
That's right. Very good. I did. I retired from the federal government with 35 years.
Yeah. You had an experience in 1967, which was a very important part of the phenomena too. But before we go into details, maybe we could discuss a little bit about military concept and configuration of sites there. I guess you were working in the Air Force base and where there were different nuclear missiles there. And we have something called a wing, a squadron, and a flight, right? And each of these components has different responsibility for different number of missiles. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, at the time it was called the 341st Strategic Missile Wing. And this is a wing that had the Minuteman I missile, solid rocket. It was an intercontinental ballistic missile, so we could hit targets far away. We had at that time some, I think, 15 launch control centers, and each launch control center controlled about 10 missiles at that time. And then this was one of many wings in the United States that had intercontinental ballistic missiles. So 1966, 67 was the height, you could say, of the Cold War, because in 1967, I believe, we had more nuclear missiles on the ready, or nuclear weapons, let's say, not just the missiles, but on submarines and bombers, nuclear weapons than at any other time. I think the number was about 37,000 nuclear weapons, bombs, which was enormous. So that was the situation. It was, of course, during the Vietnam War when I was there, and Cold War with the Soviet Union and other communist countries like China. So it was a tense, difficult situation at the time. Like I said, it was the peak of nuclear weapon buildup.
Yeah. Is it correct that each wing controlled 150 missiles and each wing had 3 squadrons?
Well, we had 3 squadrons. I was in the 490th Missile Squadron, and then we had the 10th and the 12th Squadron. So we had 3 squadrons and that's approximately the number of launch facilities we had was about 150.
Yeah, and each flight was controlling 10 independently separated.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
You were part of the Echo flight of...
No, I was Oscar flight.
Yeah, sure.
I was Oscar flight. When I first received information from the Air Force under the Freedom of Information Act, they sent me the information on the Echo flight shutdown. And I thought that was my incident because it described what I thought happened to me. So as soon as I received that information, I decided to go public because it declassified the Echo flight incident. Now, the Air Force didn't admit that it was a UFO incident, but they did declassify the Echo flight shutdown. This particular incident that happened March 16th, 1967. But I thought it was mine. I didn't know any better because it had been so long and I had forgotten exactly which flight I was in control of at the time. So I started going public. That's when I started talking. And it wasn't until 2 years later that I found out I was at Oscar flight, which is a separate flight altogether. And then I realized that we had lost 20 missiles within the span of about 8 days.
Yeah. Well, I think it happens with other cases. For example, I interviewed many pilots that were recalling their incidents 20 or 30 years ago, and I think there is nothing like special or extraordinary if some nitty-gritty detail are maybe misplaced.
The problem was I was ordered never to talk about it, and because of that, I tried to put it out of my mind. But of course, something like that you can't just erase from your mind. But the details slipped away, so I had to make an extraordinary effort to remember the details.
Yeah. Well, we can go into the incident itself, but just before we go into it, can you a little bit describe your facility where you were working? It was underground bunker?
Underground bunker, about 60 feet underground. It was a hardened site. We had all the equipment in that bunker to support missile launch. Obviously, that's what we were there for, to launch missiles in case we got the order. And at that time we didn't have, we had a lot of radio tube technology, let's say.
So a lot of cooling.
So we had to cool the equipment. We had a lot of racks and we had to keep it cool, so it was cool down there. We had display panel, and of course everything we needed to launch the weapons and communications. We had quite a lot of communications. And
those were Minuteman I.
Minuteman I,
right?
Yeah.
Which was more modern now type of missile in relation to Atlas and Titan, because the name, I think, symbolizes that it can be achieved, the launch very quickly.
Very quickly. These were solid fuel rockets, so you didn't have to worry about fueling like you did with the Titan and the Atlas. We could launch in seconds, literally, within a minute.
Yeah, that's why 24 hours a day you are on alert and everything is sort of ready and the equipment is always maintained. And that's
right.
And on the Atlas, I think they had some lag of several minutes, right, before they could actually launch and put everything ready. So this was now upgraded type of missile.
This was very like I said, very quick response time to launch.
Yeah. Okay, so we will go back to that day when everything happened. Can you tell us about the exact date and how this specific day started to develop?
Yeah, my incident happened on March 24th, 1967. I was in the capsule with my commander, Fred Mywald. Both of us were just lieutenants at the time. For some reason, Mywald, we relieved the crew on duty, and Mywald had to take the first break. We took turns because one of us had to be awake and alert.
Sure.
At all times. So he took the first break, and so sometime in the late evening, I don't remember the time, but I do know it was dark outside. I get a call from the topside guard. We had about 6 guards up there, and the guard says they've been seeing strange lights in the sky, flying very fast, no engine noise. They were able to make maneuvers that they could not believe, stopping and then reversing course immediately, things like that, making 90-degree turns. And he wanted to report it. And I was not sure why he wanted to report this to me. I mean, he was watching lights in the sky. As a matter of fact, I thought at first he was joking. But he was serious, and I said, fine, and I basically hung up on him. And then a few minutes later, he calls again. This time he's very frightened, scared, yelling into the phone, shouting, and says, sir, we're looking at a glowing red light, approximately oval-shaped, but very large light hovering above the front gate. He says he's got all the guards out there with their weapons pointed at this object. He wants me to tell him what to do next. Now, I think he was hinting that he wanted to fire at this object because they didn't know what it was. They thought it could have been some sort of an attack, some sort of incursion. And of course, we had the authority to use weapons if necessary. I just told him, just make sure nothing comes in the front gate of the gated area, the fenced area. We had it all the way around. And because this was a shock to me, I didn't know what to think. But as I hung up the phone, I realized it could have been some sort of an attack. And then, for some reason, I looked over at my missile board, and I had this strange feeling that they were going to shut down my missiles. Something was. That's what they were after. But I didn't know what it was. The thought of UFO did not enter my mind. I didn't think UFO.
There is no protocol for such a thing.
No, there was just no protocol. Nothing that we were trained for. So then I went to wake up my commander, and as I was about to tell him about the calls, the 2 calls, we started getting klaxons, sirens, whistles, a lot of noise going off in the capsule. And that's what happens when the missile, what we call, becomes no-go or disabled.
Non-launchable.
Not launchable.
Yeah.
And so we started getting red lights across the board, saying no-go, basically. I always remember all of the missiles going down. When I contacted Mywald later, he thought maybe 6 or 7 went down. And so I kind of, ceded to his memory at the time. But later on, we confirmed that all 10 missiles went down. We also had 2 of our launch facilities had security violations, meaning we had proximity sensors that if somebody tried to enter the launch facilities where the missiles were, we got indications. So we did get indications on two of those. I called upstairs immediately and sent guards to those two sites.
As a backup.
Well, I had to send them out because that was our procedure.
Intrusion, okay.
And I asked about the light up there, and he said it was gone now, but it just left. Mywald called, well, first he queried the system. We had a way of inquiring as to what the problem was. On each of the facilities, the launch facilities, we had guidance and control systems there. We had Channel 9 and Channel 12, which are guidance related. But it was the same on each one.
Okay.
So he calls to the command post back at Great Falls, Malmstrom Air Force Base. We were about 100 miles to the east.
Yes.
Yeah.
From the main base.
From the main base. And apparently they told him that the same thing happened at another site, because that's the first thing that Mywald, when he was finished calling the base, he turned to me and said the same thing happened at another site. At that time, I thought he meant that night. But
yeah.
What he should have told me was it happened a week earlier. So initially I thought it was that night. And that was the Echo flight incident.
Which was also supported by the documents that you got through Freedom of Information.
Those were the documents that supported the Echo shutdown. Then the guards called back from, when they're going out to the launch facility, they call and say they've seen the UFOs again over the launch facility. So we told them to, they wanted to return to the base. They were so frightened, they wanted to return back to the launch facility, a launch control facility, I'm sorry. So that was that. Nothing much happened except we got maintenance people to go out to the launch facilities to
put them back online.
Put them back online, and that was a involved procedure because they had to be aligned. There was a process to align them properly. Once the guidance system goes down, they have to be realigned so that they are properly aligned for targeting purposes. And then the next morning, we were relieved by another crew.
Did you try to speak with the guards then?
And that's when I went upstairs to speak with the main guard. And I think he was already told not to talk about this anymore because he was very reluctant even to speak with me. Mm-hmm. But I finally got him to talk a little bit more. And again, he just repeated what he had told me before was a very large red-orange light that was pulsating, it was hovering just above the front gate, and they were all frightened. And he was still frightened. He was still shaking when I talked to him. I wanted to ask him more questions, but they had a helicopter waiting for us. They wanted us to get back to the base, so we were helicoptered back, and as soon as we got there, we were ordered into our squadron commander's office.
Sure. And
in there was a member of the Air Force Office of Special Investigation and my commander, white as a sheet. The first thing I did is, I knew him personally. We're kind of friends. And the first thing I went up to him and said, "What the heck is going on? What the hell is going on?" He was white as a sheet. Now this guy was an bomber pilot, B-17 bomber pilot, World War II. He did many missions. He was very cool, calm, and collected, except this is the first time I ever saw him. Almost frightened. He was just white as a sheet. He said, "I don't know what's going on." It was not an Air Force exercise. And that's about all I got out of him. The next thing I know, they're shoving this paper in front of us, sign here.
Non-disclosure agreement.
Non-disclosure, if you talk about this ever to anyone, you're going to go to prison for a long time. You're going to pay a big fine and you're going to go to prison. Sign here. I tried to say, we have a high security clearance already. What's the reason for this, And we said, sign here. So we signed. We both signed. And that was that. The next morning, I got a call from some of the guards at home. Yeah, and they said, please come and talk to us. We need to get some closure about this, get your understanding of what happened, what we saw. They were very upset, and they were begging me to come and visit them and talk to them. I had to tell them no, I couldn't say anything more about it. And,
you're following the procedure. What to do is it's very strict. Completely understandable. Was it true that one guard was injured? He was trying to go.
Well, we got a report. Yeah, the main security guard said that he had to go. When I was talking to him the second time, one of my guards got injured. I later found out he tried to climb the fence and cut his hand on the barbed wire. He had barbed wire all the way around. So he was so frightened, he was trying to climb the fence.
Oh my God. And another interesting thing that you never saw these particular guards on your site ever again.
Ever again.
No. They were probably dispatched then to some other...
What they do, what the Air Force was doing with witnesses to UFO events was to disperse them. They would send, I think a lot of these guys got sent to Vietnam because they had weapons training, so they got sent to different bases. And the reason for that is they didn't want them to meet and exchange information and start problems. The other reason is, of course, we had the Condon investigation going on at that same time.
That's right.
So they did everything they could to get rid of those witnesses.
Yeah, I heard that so many times. Even I interviewed the radar operator Bill Schroeder that had an incident over Florida in 1967. Mm-hmm. Same thing happened also with him. So it seems it's a specific protocol they are applying when these things are happening. But you mentioned Condon report, which is really great part of the story. But also, of course, they are now trying to resolve this to see what was the cause. And there were two investigations, one by Boeing and another one by the Air Force. So
That's
maybe you
correct.
can
That's
talk
correct.
about it. Yeah.
So one of the first documents we got was a telegram from the headquarters of the Strategic Air Command at that time, who had control over all this, saying that we lost 10 missiles in rapid succession. They were talking about the Echo flight shutdown. And this is of grave concern, it said in the telegram. Grave concern because we don't know why they went down. So they listed various specific people that they wanted to investigate this. And one of them, a couple of names from Boeing. Boeing Aircraft had the overall contract on the Minuteman program. They had the oversight.
Yeah.
And so they wanted Boeing to investigate it. So Boeing organized a team headed by this man Kaminsky.
Yeah, Robert Kaminsky.
Robert Kaminsky. And so they started their investigation. And they went through and looked at everything. And of course, the Air Force had their own investigation going on at the same time. But that was a classified investigation. It was not... it was considered classified. And of course, the Boeing investigators were probably told that this was classified also. But anyway, Boeing went through everything they could think of: lightning, power surges, equipment malfunctions of all kinds, and they came back and found nothing that could explain this. They did isolate the particular piece of equipment called the logic coupler.
Okay.
That if it shut down, it would have triggered this upset of the guidance system. But they concluded that the failure of the logic coupler on each of these missiles separately would have to occur separately within seconds of each other, and they said that was extremely improbable. So basically impossible. And so this we do have in a document that says that specifically.
Yeah, I guess they could try to isolate what could happen, but taking into consideration that the cables were shielded and what kind of external force should be that actually has this kind of influence, I mean, that's probably they're trying all that they could do to resolve that. While the Condon Committee was active, of course, Dr. Roy Craig, which was one of the investigators, learned from Raymond Fowler, which was working for Sylvania Corporation, that your flight actually and Echo flight were shut down.
Right.
And he gave this information to the committee, right? And what
That's
was
correct.
happening.
He contacted Craig. Rafe Fowler was interested in the UFO subject, but he had heard specifically from the people he had working for him, because he was working for Sylvania. Sylvania had some kind of electrical contract on the Minuteman system.
Okay.
And so he had people working for him at Malmstrom. One of them, in fact, had seen the object. For some reason, he'd been a witness to it. And so Fowler concluded that it was a UFO event and told this to Roy Craig. Dr. Craig was the chief investigator for Condon. Craig actually came to visit Fowler in, I think it was August of 67. And then in October of 67, went to Malmstrom Air Force Base and went directly to Lieutenant Colonel Lewis Chase. Chase was the UFO officer at Malmstrom. He was actually part of the Condon investigation as a liaison. The Air Force identified various Air Force officers throughout the country that would liaison with the Condon investigators. So anyway, Craig goes to Chase and says, I want to know about this UFO event that shut down missiles that you're investigating. And first of all, Chase was shocked that Craig knew about this. This is all in Craig's book, by the way. Craig,
I have the experts right here. Yeah.
Okay, Craig wrote a book about this. And so basically, Chase told Condon to go away. Chase told Craig to go away because he couldn't give him any information. This was a classified investigation. And if he wanted more information, he would have to go to Washington, D.C. and get their approval for their review of the investigation report. Now, there was only one person on the Condon committee, and that was Robert Lowe, who could review classified information. So, which was strange. And then Lowe basically told Craig that it would be very difficult to get a copy of this report and review it, and he didn't think he was able to do it. So they decided not even to look at it. They did not follow up. And again, this kind of fits in with the whole idea that the Air Force really did the Condon investigation as a kind of a cover-up, just a whitewash of the whole UFO phenomenon. So the Oscar and Echo flight incidents were never investigated by the Condon Committee.
I mean, it's such a wasted opportunity, and Guy would think if they have such a source that something like this was happening, I mean, it's the basis of the committee itself. And now we have this Air Force fact sheet that they are always sending to everyone, where they are saying that there is no effect to national security,
Right.
and that there is no scientific advancement by this phenomena. While on the other hand, you have documents that say that the shutdown of the missiles is a grave concern to the headquarters. So, which is complete paradox and wasted opportunity of the history.
And Kaminsky was told not to complete his report. Kaminsky was the head of the Boeing team, and he was told by his boss, and this is in writing, I've got a letter from Kaminsky, who was told by his boss that this was a UFO event, but the Air Force does not want them to finish their report. Again, so this again points to cover-up.
It's a wasted opportunity of the history, definitely, and now whenever you start some kind of discussion about this phenomenon on any kind of scientific domain, they will just say, well, but it's already investigated by the committee.
Scientific investigation, which it was not. It was not a scientific investigation. Number one, the Conning Committee did not have access to classified reports, and Blue Book had a large file of classified reports that they never showed the public. The public never knew about them.
Yeah, and actually these reports are the key, because that's you get the most data, the facts, and the interaction with the military technology and everything. So it's a sad story. Anyway, at some point in time you decided to step out, which was a big step for you. I think you thought about it quite a lot, what to do. But can you explain how this situation happened in the first place?
Well, I just gave it some thought. It wasn't too long. I had always remembered those guards begging me to come and talk to them about this. And of course, this was always a question in my own mind as to exactly what happened. You know, it took time. It took time for me to fully accept the UFO phenomenon as real, even though I had this incident. But for some reason, I was intent now, because I felt it was my responsibility to those guards and the public to disclose what happened here, that this was a UFO event. So I was determined to come forward, and that's when I went to, through a friend, actually a friend of my wife's, suggested I go to MUFON and get an investigator to help me. So I did that, and that was James Klotz, my co-author on my first book, Fated Giant. I asked him to submit a request. Don't say anything about UFOs, just ask the Air Force about this incident that was reported in this book, Above Top Secret, by Timothy Good. And that's what he did. And that's, the Air Force wrote back, said, this is classified, but since it's been so long, we're going to go ahead and declassify it and send you some documents, and that's what they did.
Yeah. And all this also enabled you to actually learn more information, to share other testimonies that other colleagues left out? It was a chain reaction.
It was a chain reaction. I started getting, contacting people I knew in the Air Force, many friends, and they started giving more and more information, who was there, what happened there, and then finally I was able to get a hold of the Echo Flight crew. One of the, well, both of them actually agreed to speak about it as a UFO incident. James Carlson, not James, Eric Carlson was the commander in the
Echo Flight. In
Echo Flight, and his deputy was Walt Fiegel. And Fiegel, let me see, contacted Carlson first, and then Fiegel, I gave Fiegel's contact information. They coordinated, and Carlson wrote me back a letter a couple of letters actually saying that, yeah, basically what Fiegel told me really happened. And then eventually I got Fiegel on tape recording.
Yeah.
So I've got him on tape recording. I've got Mywald on
Yes.
tape recording.
It's on your site, right?
Yeah. So once I got that, and I got other witnesses like Bob Jameson and Dwayne Arneson supporting other parts of the story, then I had a good group of witnesses supporting what I remember.
Yeah, and you were able to distinguish that Oscar and Echo Flight were separate incidents,
finally.
and now you were able to actually give more weight to the story with better details. So
Yes.
it was a process.
There was a process, believe me.
Yeah. Of course, whenever we have prominent incidents, there are also attacks. I mean, there are skeptical theories and so on. I don't want to waste too much time on that because I can say that I put considerable time into reading of this material, but we can just for the sake of the public say what are their main arguments and what are the facts.
Well, I don't really know what James Carlson's main argument was. He claimed that it didn't happen, and he had a lot of, I don't know, reasons that he made up. And then one of them was that his father told him that it didn't happen as a UFO event. Now, why he said why his father may have said that, I never talked to Eric Carlson again after the first phone call and the letters I received, and I don't know why he may have reneged, maybe fear of ridicule, who knows. But I did talk to Walt Fiegel, and he admitted the whole thing many times to me, and like I said, I've got him on recording. So
They're trying to explain it like some sort of electrical problem, right? That was their argument, I think.
this was not an electrical problem again, and I'll talk about the other guy, Bill Nye, the science guy.
Oh, yeah.
But we did not lose power at any time during our incident. Even if we had lost power, the missiles had backup. They had generator and battery backup, and they would have come online. That had happened before, actually. We had lightning strikes before that would knock out Montana Power, and the generators brought the missiles back up. I mean, it was a very efficient system. So electricity or electrical power was not an issue. As far as Bill Nye, he went on Larry King, had a piece of paper saying that the cooling system had issues or had problems. Now, I don't know where he got this piece of paper, but again, we did not have cooling problems during the incident. Anyway, no. So neither one of those arguments were debunked, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it was strategic facility. You have to be operational all the time. And also, we could say then, okay, if this is such a common thing, is it ever happened before or after to lose so many missiles at the same time? So it was a unique event.
It was a unique event. Now, in 1966, I don't know if you've heard of David Schindele.
Yes, he was on Citizens Hearings on Disclosure.
Right.
Yeah. He has a book now, I think.
Yeah, he has a book out now. Yeah. That's right. But when he relieved the crew that he was going to take over the facility, the launch control facility, they told all 10 missiles had shut down, and they told him that UFOs had been reported. So that was another incident where apparently 10 missiles went down. during a UFO sighting. But that's the only other one I know of.
Yeah, I mean, like we already said, it is not only you who are saying this. We have multiple witnesses, we have correlation, we have testimonies, and they keep coming up. I mean, recently when you were on, I think, 2014 on Coast to Coast, oh my God, even the listeners were reporting some of their testimonies, and George Knapp was trying to get hold of them to get the numbers. So it is ongoing thing that we are getting these reports.
Yeah, there's been quite a few. As a matter of fact, in my book, I list about 14 incidents where UFOs were observed at nuclear facilities. So I've concluded, they're trying to send a message to us about nuclear weapons.
Definitely. Let me just shortly interject about Rafe Fowler, which he was working in Slovenia. And he was taking quite a considerable risk to put this on the record. He gave an interview to Christian Science Monitor, right?
Yes.
And his preface is in your book when he's going through all what he went through and the meetings that he was having while he was releasing that. So are you still in touch with him? Can you tell a little bit about his
Rafe Fowler, I've been in touch as late as about a year ago, I think. He's still alive, as far as I know, and in good health, and yeah. So Ray is what I call a stand-up guy. He was risking his job at Slovenia by giving that interview. He almost lost his job, but he was so angry about the fact that the Air Force had discounted this whole thing that he decided to go public and give an interview. And that's how that story got into Timothy Good's book.
Oh yeah, and you saw this book in 90s and you saw the chapter?
Yeah,
right?
I saw a little paragraph. Just happened to open it to that page.
And then that was what started the chain reaction.
Yes.
And that's why we are here today, sort of. Okay, and now you have two books. One is, of course, Faded Giant, great chronology of events with appendix and documents. And for me, it was really nice to see all these technical details, even the history of the missiles, which I find mostly interesting too. And another one, which is unidentified. And you go now even more further and deeper into the phenomena. Yeah. Can you maybe shortly go into that? For example, you are talking about UFO Cabal, which is also part of the speculation, but strong speculation based off also what you went through in the military. So there is some sort of coordination of these events. Can you talk about it?
Yeah. There's a lot of circumstantial evidence that this cabal existed as early as right after the Roswell incident. There was this group formed in order to, first of all, contain the information. So they were concerned about the Soviet Union getting these secrets, so they went to great lengths to intimidate witnesses and to contain the information within the military services, and that group was maintained probably to this day with different people, but also a man by the name of Wilbert Smith, Canadian engineer
from Canada.
Worked with this group, this secret group under Vannevar Bush.
Yeah, we have documents.
Yeah, and so that and then the CIA getting involved in the Robertson panel. Discussing how to contain and disinform the public about this phenomenon. So, and many reports of the CIA getting involved. So I'm convinced that not only the CIA, and of course, in talking to other military people all over the world that I've been speaking with, have told me that their generals have met with United States Air Force personnel in exchanging information on UFO incidents. So I'm convinced that there is a very secretive group worldwide that's sharing information and containing the information. So,
sure. Of course, to accept the phenomena is one thing, but there is so many different sections of it, and for some of them it's hard to talk. But if we accept that in the starting view that we have some kind of intrusion and some kind of manifestation, then obviously one thing will lead to another. It's sort of a part of it. And you spoke briefly that when the missiles were shutting down, you felt some sort of a message, which is, of course, when you heard something like this for the first time, could be maybe strange for somebody, but if you do a review of the phenomena, it's part of it, let's be honest. And you also wrote about your experience in the book. I can imagine how hard it was to step forward about it. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that, but I think even the fact that you talked about it says that there was really something there that affected you, and you felt that is important to put it on the public, for the public to see that this is what is happening.
Yes, I did have a experience, an abduction experience, and I knew about this as of 2007, when I was actually here in Ireland.
Oh my God, okay.
Yes, I was speaking at a conference in Carrick-on-Shannon, yeah. A UFO conference, and then one of the speakers got up there and said, you know, she'd been taken, and but when she was in bed, she saw this blue light come into her bedroom, and so I asked my wife. She was sitting next to me. I said, "Do you remember a blue light coming into our bedroom?" Way back in the 80s, or, you know, a long time ago? And she said, yes, I do.
So that's a verification.
So that got me thinking about the incident, or the incident that I can relate to you, where in 1985, my wife and I and two small children were in our bedroom, and I woke up in the middle of the night and a blue light was in our living room. So I tried to get up and go see the blue light, go check on this light, and I was paralyzed. I couldn't move. Paralyzed, yeah. Next thing I remember seeing, and I worked hard to try to get my mobility. I even asked my wife for help, but she was now unconscious. I'd waken her up, and she also saw the blue light, but then she went unconscious, and so I tried to, I couldn't move. Next thing I remember, this being in the doorway had a hood on. Don't remember seeing the face, but I remember then there were other beings in the room, small beings, childlike, small. And then I was lifted up, I went towards the window, and I thought they couldn't open the window. I went right through the window. So this is very strange, I know, but that's how I remember it.
Sure. If we see it by the one singular case, it could be, but we can see the pattern. I mean, you are not alone who is reporting these types of things. And there is sort of common denominator maybe in these cases that we can actually see. And if somebody goes through the literature and try to inform himself or herself, he can see that there are these type of weird experiences.
So I decided to go public with it a few years ago because I wanted to support the fact all the other people that weren't able to talk about this. I wanted to support them, and so I went ahead with that.
And I think because it's coming from you, it has additional weight. Because let's be honest, to be a worker in to be an officer in such a military facility, you have strict training, you have psychological evaluations. I mean, oh my God, you are a part of the strategic response of the United States in the event of nuclear war. And I mean, there is strict procedure checklist. You have to maintain the equipment, right? Can you talk a little bit about the training? I mean, it probably was intense.
Well, it was pretty extensive. It took about a year. So we knew how the systems worked. We were trained in all the details, and they made sure that we were fairly sane. Because at that time we did have the ability to launch missiles on our own. My commander and I in the capsule could have launched those missiles.
10 of them.
At will.
Yeah.
And, thank God nobody ever did that. So they have more controls now, but not then.
I think it's really tough job to do. I mean, did you have ever some kind of ethical thinking about it? What would happen?
It's rather interesting, as a military person, you follow orders,
I completely understand.
You were a military man yourself.
The better you stay cool on your job, it will be more efficient.
Yeah, so we didn't really talk about not following the order to launch. We were dedicated. If we had been given the order, we would have launched. And I think it's probably the same today. That's the way we're trained, and that's we're enforcing the policy of the United States to feeling that it's our job to do this. So, yeah. I would have done it. I would have started World War III.
But Cold War was a complex era. This kind of balance was actually sort of enabling the peace in the long run in the end. So it's a complex and difficult environment, I can imagine. But it was part of the facility, a strategic component of the country. So
it's a very stupid policy called MAD, right? Mutually Assured Destruction. Very stupid, and I'm very much against it now, of course. And I've been speaking out against the policy of nuclear weapons.
And the phenomena itself, when you take all this into consideration, also brings you to another level of understanding the world, I presume.
Exactly.
Yeah. It was such an honor to speak with you tonight, and for the end maybe we can just say something about contact data. Do you have any additional plans in the near future, any conferences? Books?
I'm being more selective now on the conferences because I'm not so much interested in speaking to people that already believe in the phenomenon. I'm more interested in getting the phenomenon in front of the general public. And so I'm a little bit more selective, but I've got conferences planned for the future, one in South Africa in the spring, and I am writing another book.
Okay.
But I'll try to, I'm still developing that book, so we'll see how that goes. But I am in process.
Deal with phenomena too?
It will deal with this phenomenon, but it's going to be on a fictional book because I want to include in this book a lot more details that I've heard from many, many sources, but details that are difficult to support. So I can't honestly turn it into a non-fictional account like the ones I've written. But it's important to get this information, I think, out to the public, even though it's in a fictional form.
I personally think, and this is really my honest opinion, that you are a hero. Because if we didn't have this type of testimony of yours, we would not have really better understanding of this phenomena. And like we said, it caused chain reaction. So many people stepped out. Also because of you. You are one of the first that was pointing to this type of manifestation. And we can also get the sense of the phenomena more closer. Because like you said, there was some kind of message there that we are receiving with shutdowns of these missiles. Maybe you can talk about that shortly for the end.
Absolutely. We are being communicated to by the extraterrestrials about our nuclear weapons and even nuclear energy. That this could completely ruin our civilization. Today, as we speak, we are the closest to nuclear war as we have ever been with the situation in North Korea. There's no doubt the North Koreans do have nuclear weapons and would use them if attacked. And our president is difficult to understand what he would do, but he has access to issuing orders to use nuclear weapons. So we are in a critical stage, and I think it's important for our civilization to get through this stage and get serious about the process of denuclearization. In other words, going towards zero nukes. We have to work hard to do that, to show that we are responsible enough to protect our world and our civilization.
To reach a better society in the end.
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Salas, it was such a pleasure to speak with you tonight. I wish you all the best wishes to have a great time in Ireland, and I hope we will stay in touch.
It's good speaking to you, Jim.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.